This is the Ken and Mike Show. And now, Ken and Mike.
Hey.
Hello, how are you?
Welcome back.
Well, thank you.
Welcome back.
I'm Tanner.
You're Tanner.
I
well,
am.
I was saying welcome back to the Ken and Mike Show. We've been, out for 2 weeks, but welcome back for vacation.
Thank you very much. We had 2 reruns of some encore presentations, actually.
Your color actually contrasts with your T-shirt right now.
I appreciate that very much. Yes, I can wear white now without...
He didn't tan. That's just the effects on the video.
Thank you. Okay, you told everybody. Why'd you do that?
Mike's still white, though.
He turned up the saturation a little bit on the
I
color.
appreciate that.
only on the left side of the screen.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. He's really good with that kind of stuff. So turn it down, though, so I can come back to white. Hey, so, we had 2. I want to mention, number one, thank you for joining us this evening.
Welcome back to the Ken and Mike Show on the BMG Network.
On the BMG Network. Hey, we had 2 great shows that we encored while I was away.
Yes.
One of them being an old one from the I put on there too. It's from the archives.
I loved it.
Yeah, it was with the creation guys.
Creation guys and the
about
whole
the flat Earth.
I had to rewatch it again.
I'd love to hear what our guest tonight has to say about that. I know that's off topic, but
well, we're gonna go from flat Earth to UFOs.
Yeah, right.
It kind of plays in, doesn't it?
It does. I guess so. Yeah.
Tinfoil hats. It's
right.
all there.
If there was UFO on the edge, it could fall.
There you go.
So the thing is, though, too, is that we also had our other show with Sam Sorbo.
Yes.
Which was a fantastic interview, by the way.
She was a fantastic guest. I remember.
She was. I got to adjust my chair here. Basically, though, with her, she talked about her book, Words for Warriors, and if you haven't got a chance to check those out, you can do so. You can go right to our Ken and Mike Show page on the BMG Network. All of the shows are there. Recent ones, of course. If you want to go in the archives, you have to kind of scoot around Facebook, I think, or YouTube. Go to our YouTube. If you have not yet subscribed to YouTube, please do so. That is growing.
YouTube,
Facebook, Twitter.
Are we still on Instagram?
I don't know. Are we on Instagram? Have you been posting pictures of yourself?
Are we on the gram anymore?
We are on the gram. I don't know how active we are.
I don't know the password, so I don't know.
Are we on the gram?
Twitter, we've been kind of...
want me to tell you the password? I could say it right now.
Tell everybody in the world.
I'll put it on the screen.
Yeah,
I know the password.
I'll make a couple mentions. Number one, there was a brand new podcast that came out by the Adrian Ross Show, on the Adrian Ross Show.
We listened to it live today in the shop.
Fantastic, right?
In the shop. It was awesome.
Fantastic. And of course, if you have not heard that, go to the BMGnetwork.com and check out the Adrian Ross Show. The title of that is Mind Shift: 5 things that do not indicate if you... What is the actual whole title? I don't remember now.
I'm just tired of her upstaging us. She does a fabulous job.
Oh, that's what it is. If you're thinking about a career change, okay, she goes... that's what thing. Everything's on the table with her, and she says that. It's like a potpourri. She goes from this way to that way. And
it's a buffet.
It is a buffet. But it's Mind Shift: 5 things that do not indicate if you should leave your job. And she kind of goes into why you shouldn't be scared. If you have a prompt and do something, fear holds us back. Our mindset holds us back, and we have to renew our mindset.
I was doing a checklist in the back of my head while I was listening to it. Did I do that? Yeah, I did that. That was bad.
Yeah. So if you haven't checked that out, do so. The Pac-Man and the Pac Perspective, there's a brand new article out there that he put up just while I was on vacation this past week. A great column on there, again, at the BMGnetwork.com. Also, you can check out Adrian's columns as well. You can subscribe to him. You'll see a link there.
We need to invite Ted on the show.
We got to have Ted on here.
We should have him here on the show.
He wants to be here.
We know he's called in a couple times,
yes,
but we really need to have the full effect of
Ted Flint.
Yes, we do.
It'd be a good time.
It'd be a blast.
Yeah. But yeah, you can check all those things out. And we got, and real quick too, is we're gonna have a whole revamped version of the Mic'd Up with Mike Hansen.
Yes.
Coming up the first week of July.
Yes,
next
sir.
week. And of course, you can check out the Ken Burns Show as well. But I'm only tooting my own horn. So.
Oh well, you got to listen. I'll toot it for you.
Who?
But yeah, it's some guy. Don't worry about him.
Kenny who?
Yeah, right. But listen, tonight.
Ken does burn.
Tonight on the show.
Ken does burn.
Yeah, I do. But I turns the tan.
Kenny Burns does burn.
Yeah, I do. Tonight on the show, we will be discussing something that we believe is certainly becoming more and more of a hot topic, and that is this UFO phenomenon. Okay.
They are real.
And with
of course the word itself is real.
But we're gonna with our guest tonight, we're gonna link that in with intelligent design, because we believe that there is, right? So I mean, what is really happening, honestly? I can't speak for all of us, but I, out of curiosity, watched the videos of what these so-called unidentified flying objects are. They're jolting around the universe. We see them on...
The name is right there. It's an unidentified flying object. There's a million of them out there.
What are they? Okay, we don't know. Okay. So are they demonic? Are they military? Are they... we heard all these theories.
I have theories.
I know you do. I want to hear what this guy's got to say.
No, my theories.
Okay, right, whatever. So, I don't know about you guys. I've watched some just out of curiosity, I've watched documentaries, and there's old ones, there's new ones, just because it's like, this is interesting, the whole. So one thing is certain, and that is that we know that we are somehow, some way, we're here, right? We're here, whether you believe that's intelligent design or not. But it's really good to discover these things. So our belief is that we're here and we're designed by God. But back on the show tonight is an expert who can answer these questions much more accurately, no offense, than you.
I was going to say, you said intelligent design. Yeah. I've seen some people walking around out there.
Wow. Mel, was he talking?
I mean, this guy has PhD in his name, so...
Right, exactly. I'll say this right now. So joining us now is Dr. Stephen Meyer, who, by the way, received his PhD in the philosophy of science from the University of Cambridge. A former geophysicist and college professor, he now directs Discovery Institute's Center for Science and Culture in Seattle. He is an author of best-selling books, including his latest one entitled Return of the God Hypothesis. Stephen, if you were there, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're so glad that you're back on the show with us tonight.
With you guys, it's nice to have a return visit.
Yeah, it really is. We really appreciated it. We had a little flub at the time, but we really appreciate. We kind of fought through that, and it was great. And we have you back on.
We were well educated last time he was on, so we're prepared for another education.
Yes, that's just it. Because we can sit here and talk about all our opinions about it, but honestly, I'm like, I don't know. I guess I could look under a microscope and see let's let him
have at it.
Yeah. So listen, so obviously there is a kind of a phenomenon going on, and your book really goes into the intelligent design, and you've, in my opinion, debunked a lot of these other theories, even with Hawkins and these guys. So, what is your honest opinion? I mean, maybe this is kind of a big general question, but what is going on in the atmosphere with these things that are dinging around? What is your opinion?
Well, I was going to tell you right off that my opinion is probably no better than anyone else's on this. And when you look at the Navy report that was filed Friday, one thing that's very clear, it's inconclusive.
Yes.
And it's inconclusive because there are so many competing explanations for what these aerial phenomena or visual phenomena are, from everything from the one that's getting all the attention with the idea that maybe they're evidence of alien in astronauts or something, to the evidence of hypersonic capability in some of our adversaries, which I think is actually much more concern. The idea that they're visual mirages of various kinds. There's been a very good article by an aeronautical analyst in the London Guardian, who tracked a Peruvian airplane and found that he could that there was a kind of spatial delay between the position of the aircraft and the visual phenomena that they were observing. And in that case, it seemed like a pretty good explanation of what was being observed that had nothing to do with anything scary. So there's just a whole range of possible explanations, and I'm as agnostic as the next guy about whether or not there is intelligent life on other planets. The main, I have a piece in the New York Post coming out this Sunday, and the main point I made in the New York Post article, which I've also made in the book, is that even if there is an alien intelligence someplace out in space, it doesn't explain the origin of life or the origin of the universe or the origin of its finely tuned structure. Three big facts that I've argued support a God hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And one thing I noted in the piece is that it's not just pilots and UFO enthusiasts who've been talking about the possibility of alien intelligence. It's actually scientists. Mm-hmm. And they've been talking about alien intelligence for several decades, going back with Francis Crick as far as 1980. And the reason that alien intelligence has been invoked is because the problem of explaining the origin of the first life on Earth has turned out to be so prohibitively difficult. And because even the simplest living cells are manifest complex digital nanotechnology that bears all the hallmarks of intelligent agency. We've got, and this was Francis Crick's great discovery and hypothesis, that that inside the DNA molecule, the chemical subunits of the DNA molecule are storing and transmitting information, and those subunits are functioning like alphabetic characters in a written text or digital zeros and ones in a section of software. Bill Gates, famous software developer out here in Seattle, has said that DNA is like a software program, but much more complex than any we've ever created. In fact, that's true. And we know from experience that software comes from programmers, and information, especially in a digital or alphabetic form, is the sole province of mind. It comes, whether we find it in a paragraph in a book or a signal, a radio signal, or if we found information embedded in a radio signal coming from space, we would infer the activity of a designing intelligence, because we know only minds or intelligent agents produce information. And yet the cell is chock full of information, instructions for building the crucial protein and protein machines that keep us alive. Richard Dawkins, just to underscore this point, 2 weeks ago, tweeted that he was this is the world's most famous scientific atheist. He tweets that he's knocked sideways by the exquisite information data processing capability inside even the simplest living cells. So scientists have been positing an alien intelligence because they can't think of any other way by which the informational properties of life would have arisen. Brute chemistry doesn't create code. It creates really complex combinations of chemicals that don't do anything. So this is why aliens have been invoked. But I've argued in my new book, Return of the God Hypothesis, and in this recent op-ed, that the panspermia idea, as it's called, directed panspermia or alien intelligence, leaves or begs a really important question. If these alien beings on some other planet seeded life on this planet, but only did so after they had evolved from simpler life forms, what got that evolutionary process going in the first place? How did life first arise? And how did the information necessary to produce life first arise on some other planet? The alien intelligence idea doesn't explain that. It just kicks that question out into space, out of view, and without answering it.
Yeah,
exactly.
It keeps kicking the can down the road.
Exactly.
It's circular reasoning.
Then how were they created?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would argue that God is extraterrestrial outside of here alone.
In a sense, he is. Yes, very good.
See, Mike, you are smart.
Extra. Well, and actually, this is a it's a humorous point you make, but it's a substantive philosophical and scientific point as well, because the other thing that the alien intelligence explanation doesn't account for is the origin of the universe itself, and the origin of what physicists describe as the fine-tuning of the universe, the improbable fine-tuning of all the physical parameters that make life possible. Those physical parameters were set from the very beginning of the universe itself, or very soon after. And clearly no being within the cosmos could be responsible for the origin of the universe itself, or of the fine-tuning parameters that make its evolution and life possible. So this is one of the reasons in making my case in Return of the God Hypothesis for a theistic designer, a transcendent mind rather than an immanent intelligence within the cosmos, such as an alien, that I argued that the theistic design hypothesis provides a better overall explanation for what we see, because we have to not only account for the origin of life, and I don't think the panspermia alien intelligence does that adequately, but also for the origin of the universe and its fine-tuning. And there, I think a theistic design hypothesis or a theistic creator is hands down a better explanation than an alien.
I agree with you.
I agree.
You know, I actually, I was checking out one of your lectures. I think it was back in 2020. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned something that stood out to me in a great way, and it was a quote by Kepler. I don't know how to say his first name. Is it Johannes?
Johannes,
Okay.
yeah, right. One of the
And-
great
yeah.
scientists, a devoutly religious man. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said, which I loved in this, and I'll read it for the audience just so they know. I know that you know this quote, but it says, I was merely thinking God's thoughts after him, since we astronomers are priests of the highest God in regard to the book of nature. It benefits us to be thoughtful, not of the glory of our minds, but rather, above all else, of the glory of God. And I think that right there, having that mindset, sets a whole different precedence for anyone who's looking into and trying to discover things. Because if you're already trying to like seek glory for yourself or figure it out on your own, I mean, I feel like it almost stifles you right there and then already, because we're so finite. Our minds are so, honestly, I don't mean to sound so bad for all of us, but we're pea-sized compared to something greater than ourselves. So we're trying to really logically process things that we honestly, some things we can't process. We can try to discover, and God wants to show us. But I mean, we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. I feel like these guys, certain people want to have the answers, and it's black and white.
Well, in all the early scientists and some of the greatest scientists in history had that sense that in discerning this underlying order, often precise mathematical order that is observable in the regularities that we call laws of nature, or in viewing the intricacy of design of any living organism, even right now, we know, right to the cellular level. Many great scientists have had the sense that they were encountering the work of a mind of great capacity, greater than our own capacity. And Einstein had this wonderful illustration of he said, being a scientist is like being a child and walking into a library. And seeing that there are all these books and they've all been arranged in some very particular order, and recognizing that there is a particular order, but not being fully aware of what that underlying order is, and having to work hard to discern it. And that's actually a very ancient metaphor for the scientific enterprise, the idea of two books. So there was a book of scripture and a book of nature. And Johannes Kepler, in talking about thinking God's thoughts after him, was also expressing that idea that the universe is intelligible to us. It can be understood. It can be read like a book because it was made by a rational creator who also made our minds in his image. And that allows us to perceive the order and the design and the rationality that the creator built into nature. And that is the inspiration for modern science. It was from the beginning. There's a wonderful book by published at Princeton University Press called For the Glory of God. And I think it was probably lifting the title from that quote you just gave from Kepler, written by the great historian of science, Rodney Stark. And this is widely recognized now among leading historians of science, that science was a theological project from the beginning. And the idea that science and religion are at war is as a consequence of modern atheistic polemics. It's not really an accurate reflection of the history of science itself.
Yeah, exactly. They're hand in hand. I mean,
well, you can't. I don't think you can have one without the other.
Right. Exactly.
But when you think back on that kind of deeply theological inspiration for science, and the many things that have been discovered that have, in the minds of great scientists, Faraday, Newton, Boyle, Kepler, James Clerk Maxwell, the great physicist who developed his laws of electromagnetism, upon which most of modern society depends and works. We can't run dams without understanding Maxwell's equations. These guys not only had theological or Judeo-Christian presuppositions about nature and about the nature of God that informed their scientific study. When they got deep into the study of nature, they found evidence that in turn pointed back to God. So it's kind of a two-way street.
Yeah.
And we've lost a bit of that in the 20th century, quite a bit, since Darwin, Marx, Freud, figures like that. But the point of my book is that the theistic perspective is either coming back, or it darn well should be, because the discoveries of the last 100 years about the universe having a beginning, the universe being finely tuned from the beginning, and this complex realm of digital information technology that has been discovered in even the simplest cells. This is mind-blowing stuff. We never expected no materialist expected to discover anything like any of these three main discoveries. And so I think it's starting to really move the needle in the discussion, the worldview discussion that's going on around science. And I think it's starting to tip in a theistic direction.
That's awesome.
Why do you think, maybe from the other perspective, though, and I kind of alluded to this with Kenny before the show, just because we don't have an answer or can't conclusively state one area to be true or not, why is the default position from those who argue against theistic creation, why would the default argument be, well, since it can't be explained, it can't be true?
Well, right. Sometimes that question is framed just a little differently and more pointedly as a challenge to the viewpoint that I'm developing, and that is, well, just because science can't explain something doesn't mean you should invoke God as the explanation. But notice the kind of argument I'm making is an argument that pits competing worldviews, one against another, to say which provides a more plausible overall explanation, which worldview has more explanatory power. It's absolutely true that there is no scientific explanation that explains the origin of the universe, nor can there be if by science you mean a materialistic explanation, or an explanation tendered by reference to laws or processes of physics, for the simple reason that prior to the origin of the universe, there was no physics to describe, and there was no matter, space, time, or energy.
Right.
But that's precisely the consideration that leads one to consider the need for an external creator who in some way transcends the domains of matter, space, time, and energy, and who is yet powerful enough to cause a dramatic change of state between nothing and something. This is what we mean, after all, by a creator. And so theism emerges as a system of thought with unique explanatory power. The attributes of the theistic creator, of God, a transcendent, intelligent, powerful, volitional agent, are precisely the type of attributes that are required to account for the origin of the universe from literally nothing. Whereas materialism or naturalism as a worldview has nothing to offer by way of explanatory power, because it affirms the eternal and self-existence of the physical world. And therefore, if the physical world itself comes into existence a finite time ago, before that, causally or temporally, or however you want to conceive of that, there is nothing there to do the causing. There is no material entity that could be invoked as the causal agent behind the origin of the universe. And this was well and intuitively understood by the leading physicists and cosmologists in the 20th century, as the evidence started to mount in favor of what's now called the Big Bang Theory and various versions of it, such as modern inflationary cosmology, which also affirms a beginning to the universe. The cosmologists and the astrophysicists had a kind of knee-jerk reaction against this initially, because, as Einstein put it, it smacked of the Christian doctrine of creation, and he flat out didn't like it. And Fred Hoyle said the exact same thing, though both of them eventually came around. Einstein said that his gerrymandering of his own equations to circumvent the implications of general relativity, those implications being that the universe was dynamic and therefore likely expanding from a beginning point. His attempt to gerrymander some of his equations to circumvent that implication, he later characterized as the greatest blunder of his scientific career. And Hoyle, who started out as a devout atheist, who dubbed the evidence for the beginning of the universe the Big Bang in order to stigmatize the idea, later ended up embracing a form of theism as a result of discovering some of these exquisitely improbable fine-tuning parameters. He's famously quoted as saying that a common sense interpretation of the data, meaning the fine-tuning evidence, suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics in order to make life possible. So there's been some big shifts. When I say the return of the God hypothesis, I'm talking about some very high-level scientists who have had intellectual transformations because of these major discoveries.
And there was one just recently, I believe. I think you had an article on your Facebook about someone just recently that I can't remember the exact article. It was the most recent one on your Facebook page, and it talked about somebody.
Well, I have a very impressive colleague from Germany, Gunther Beckley.
Yes, this is it.
Who is a leading insect paleontologist, world-class insect paleontologist. He curated the Stuttgart Museum of Natural History's 200-year anniversary display on the origin of species and Darwin. It was the 150th anniversary of the origin of species and the 200th anniversary of Darwin's birth in 2009. Beckley was the curator of that exhibit, that most important exhibit in the advance of the public understanding of evolutionary theory. And it was about that time he began to read books on the case for intelligent design because he wanted to be able to understand what the opposite side of the argument was in case he was asked about it in the media. And this created an intellectual crisis for him as he realized that the proponents of intelligent design had been unfairly maligned in the media, mischaracterized, and they actually had a strong empirical and theoretical case, and he began to think about it. And in 2016, after a long period of deliberation, he announced that he was in fact a supporter of the theory of intelligent design. Later also had a religious conversion to first theism and then Catholic Christianity. So he's a fascinating figure. He's not only a fantastic scientist, but he's very well versed in philosophy and physics. He's a classic polymath, and so he's just one of many scientists that have made that intellectual transformation or had that intellectual transformation occur.
That's incredible.
Wow.
That's really cool to hear. Because I mean,
that's an awesome testimony.
Thinking about, you mentioned Dawkins.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
You don't want to debate this dude. He was on British radio 2 weeks ago. Your listeners might enjoy this, debating an American biology professor named Joshua Swamidass, who's a good guy and smart guy, but Swamidass is a supporter of theistic evolution, and I think Beckley was at one point, one of his answers so impressed the British host, he just said, "Wow!" It's like, this guy, it's the full package of European erudition. I mean, he's really something, and I mean, it's not dumb second-rate scientists that are making this move to intelligent design. This guy's world class, and it was really impressive. And people want to check it out for themselves. They might find the unbelievable broadcast by Justin Brierley and have a listen.
I'll check that out because what's cool, and the word that comes to mind for any of these people is the word humility. Mm-hmm. If we can just have a little bit of that, it creates an open door for us to say, I may be wrong in what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Because
or I just may need to rethink and recalibrate.
Exactly. If we can do that.
What's the old Shakespeare quote about? There may be more things under heaven and earth that are present in your philosophy, Horatio or somebody. I can't remember the exact Shakespeare play, but the quote's about our preconceived notions may not actually capture all of reality.
That's true.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, it's interesting.
Just say hypothetically that we and now asking someone of far more intelligence than myself, but say hypothetically this going back to the UFO and extraterrestrial activity and all that. Say that this is discovered that there is a truth. In your opinion, does it change anything
of what Christ did?
Well, not as far as what Christ did, but does it change anything of who God is?
I don't think so. I think theists can afford to be completely agnostic on the question, wait for the evidence to decide it. There are some people of a naturalistic or materialistic worldview that hold the view that life must inevitably arise by the evolutionary process, and therefore, given the number of planets and galaxies, there must be life everywhere in the universe to confirm their expectation that it's easy for life to arise by undirected, unguided natural processes. I think if there is life elsewhere in the cosmos, it will necessarily require, as our form of life does, information. Information is that thing which produces a specificity of arrangement. It is by definition a specificity of arrangement. And informational codes direct the arrangement of physical parts into specific configurations. Any system worthy of being called life is not going to be an amorphous blob of molecules or atoms. It's going to have very specific arrangement of parts that will allow us to recognize biological processes such as metabolism or information processing or the like. And so you can't get life without information. And in our experience, our uniform and repeated experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning, information, functional information, especially information in a digital form, always arises from a prior intelligent source. And you can't keep kicking that can back indefinitely without coming to the beginning of the universe. And therefore, I think ultimately, you don't explain the origin of life or the origin of the universe or the fine-tuning without a reference to a transcendent mind. And so if there's life in the universe, I think that it too must have been designed by such a transcendent mind, not by some other alien. And that raises the interesting prospect that God may have wanted to create life in more than one place. That's certainly a possibility. And as the Robert Boyle, the great scientist during the period of the scientific revolution that we were talking about, used to say, he said, it's not up to the scientist to determine what God must have done, but rather to go and look and see what he did in fact do. So I think it's an empirical question. We need to remain open, but I don't think there's conclusive evidence
Let me ask you one
way or
question.
another at this point.
Let me ask you one question, and this may be more of a theological question more than it is a scientific question. But let me at least explain my point of thinking, and you can just tell me I'm far off.
You bet.
I really don't know. But if, for whatever reason, there is life out there in this vast cosmos of planetary whatever that's out there, wouldn't it, in my purview, this is why I don't buy into it, because I've heard many people, many celebrities say, well, it's very ignorant to think and very cocky for us to think and conceited for us to think that we're the only intelligent life out there out of this great cosmos. I would like to also think that if we are the apple of God's eye, okay, my way of thinking is, if we discover something that's out there, wouldn't it cheapen the gospel, number one? And number two, wouldn't it marginalize what Christ did on the cross?
Well, there's a wonderful trilogy of books by C.S. Lewis, his famous space trilogy. The first was Out of the Silent Planet, the second one Perelandra, and the third Hideous Strength. And he entertains in the space trilogy the idea that there is life on another planet, but these other intelligent agents, also made in God's image, did not rebel against God, and so there was no need for redemption. And they view our planet from the distance as this the silent planet that is rather menacing and of some kind of concern to them.
So I could see God up there looking at us, going, "Why can't you be like them?"
I think you could play this out theologically different ways. But let me give you a scientific take on this that's a little bit outside the typical conventional wisdom, but I think is quite well justified.
Please.
It's always been assumed, it's been commonly assumed, that life in the universe must be common because there are so many galaxies. There's 200 billion galaxies, is the latest estimate that I've read. Wow. And there's an equation called the Drake equation where scientists calculate the probability of life existing someplace else. But part of that equation assumes that chemical evolution, the origin of the first life from simpler non-living chemicals, would occur readily and spontaneously nearly everywhere or easily. I think that's now pretty definitively refuted by origin of life research. The chemical reactions of known relevant chemicals that we know, simple chemicals, simply don't move on their own in a life-friendly direction. Yeah. The chemistry doesn't do what origin of life researchers wish it did. But in addition to that, even though there are billions and billions of galaxies, then that has to be balanced against the number of parameters that have to be exactly right in order for life to exist, and the improbability associated with those multiple parameters. And this is called the fine-tuning problem, and it occurs at both a cosmological level, getting just basic things like the strength of gravity and electromagnetism, or the masses of elementary particles just right so that even basic chemistry could occur. And it also occurs in a planetary vein, or in a planetary context, getting a solar system set up just right so that a life-friendly planet is protected from asteroids and meteorites like Jupiter, which big gas giants we have in the outer part of our solar system operate like big vacuum cleaners and sweep that stuff up and keep us from getting whacked all the time. The planets, a life-friendly planet needs to be in a circumstellar habitable zone, just the right distance from a central star. It has to have the right axial tilt to establish seasons. There's got to be, it's got to have liquid water on the planet. You just go down the list.
Harkens back to the privileged planet.
And so you got to balance the number of possibilities against the improbability of the parameters, or the improbability of all things aligning properly. And among astronomers, including some secular astronomers, there is an increasing sympathy for the view that, well, maybe we are the only ones, or that life is extremely rare. The two astronomers at the University of Washington, neither of them proponents of intelligent design, no sympathies for theism, as far as I know. Peter Ward and Don Brownlee wrote a famous book in 2005 called Rare Earth, and where they made this argument that the improbability of the parameters, which you might put in the denominator, dwarfs the number of possibilities in the numerator. And so it's an open question, but it's not an obvious. The answer isn't obviously yes, there must be life somewhere else. We just don't know, and there are some reasons to be skeptical that it would have. I think a very great reason to be skeptical that it would have evolved anywhere else by undirected, unguided processes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But if God chose to put it someplace else, then it could be.
Yeah.
But it's not a slam dunk one way or another.
Because that's what's interesting, because they are, like, right now they're always utilizing, I think it's radio signals, correct, to try to see if they can discover something in the cosmos, if they can find activity, but they haven't heard anything.
Hey, you're right. That's another interesting angle on all this, because there is what's known as the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI. And the idea of SETI is that we can search the heavens with a big radio telescope, scanning the heavens for radio signals that might include the radio signals that might have embedded within them information. So you have, like, we have used radio with modulation to send out information laden signals, and we can transmit and receive. And the idea is that if we receive a signal that's got information in the radio signal, in the radiation, that therefore there would be this would be evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. Well, the search for the SETI program has come up dry on that. They haven't found any signals. There was a fascinating film called Contact, which speculated about, we had played out the scenario where some of the researchers found a radio signal with a prime number sequence embedded in it. They realized, oh my gosh, we found ET. But nothing like that in reality has actually been found. But whereas we haven't found that kind of information in a radio signal coming from space, we have found that kind of specified digital information stored in the DNA molecule, the very indicator of intelligence that would cause us to infer ET if it were coming from space, is present in every living cell of every living organism on planet Earth, suggesting by the same logic that an intelligent agent played a role in the origin and history of life on the planet.
That's interesting. That's incredible. It blows your mind to think that I mean, because going down the logical realm here, I mean, we can sit here and speculate these things. Okay, we know about the DNA, like you're talking about now, but I mean, these objects that they're seeing. I mean, I haven't seen it. I've never seen anything. I just know that there's things on video and they can do these crazy things. I mean, do you ever speculate possibly? I mean, kind of, this is this is part of science too. Is it a possibility that there's a military thing going on as well? I mean, do you think any of this could play into that?
Well, we've done some research in a different program. We've been involved in advocating for some various forms of missile defense at Discovery Institute. It's a different program than the one I direct, Center for Science and Culture. But I know one of the things that the military are quite concerned about is hypersonic capability in our near-peer adversaries, as they sometimes call them. And I don't think, just as a matter of policy, we're doing enough to develop missile defense systems and systems that could defend against hypersonic capability. I think we've started to get into that development as far as I've been reading, but I think that is a concern. And if some of the pilots were seeing was evidence of greater capability than our competitors have let on to have told us that they possess, then that would be, I think, a concern for national security reasons.
Because in physics, you can prove that we're capable of coming to a hypersonic kind of stage in life as far as our technology goes. Correct? Or
well, it's not in life, but rather in the ability to cause things to move super fast.
Right. Yes.
So weapon systems and the like.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Because it reminds me of, like you mentioned, Einstein a while ago, and when he wrote the letter to the president talking about the atom bomb, he's just like, okay, other people our competitors, like you're mentioning, have this capability. We need to do something now.
Yeah, exactly. Heads up. We better either develop it ourselves or be prepared to in some way defend against it.
Yeah.
And
Well, I like the way this was billed in the media. Is like these great disclosures that's going to be released about UFO technology and things like that. Things that supposedly they've been hidden from the American public. But my question would be, and I said this to Kenny,
yes.
why are we so special? Why is it America that we're going to release this unredacted documents of everything that we found in the 50s, Area 51, all that stuff? But why do aliens only have interest in the USA?
why are they only bothering the USA and not Chile or
so why haven't other nations haven't been a part of
right,
it? So
right.
it just makes me I don't buy it.
It's interesting.
Makes you a tidgy bit skeptical. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Hollywood. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Why is that? I mean, I don't hear much of other countries talking about this. And I've seen documentaries where they've said they've seen stuff in other countries, but I don't see them promoting this stuff as much as we do, unless I'm wrong.
Well, and again, as predicted, the report from the Navy was utterly inconclusive.
Yeah.
So it's,
right.
There's a big buildup to it, but it certainly didn't settle the issue. So
It fell
we'll
flat.
maybe wait for further disclosures or some more concrete evidence.
What is your opinion on some of these guys from back in the day, like the Bob Lazars of the day and these types of people? Now, I'm sure you know all about these guys. What is your take on these guys? Are they out to lunch or?
I guess I'm not sure who Bob Lazar is, so maybe I don't know. Is he a famous UFO enthusiast? Or?
He was the one that they just did a documentary again on him. He was the one they kind of said he was a nut. He worked, I think, either in Area 51 or near there, and he thought he saw something while he passed a window. He said he reverse engineered some of these ships. And then he came out, and they did this whole and his story still stands true today after all these years.
I haven't heard it.
I honestly just really don't know that much about.
It tells me I'm watching the wrong stuff.
Early reports of this stuff. Yeah, but
I need to put my mind to something else.
Off topic though, before we let him go, I have to ask you,
Yes.
what is that behind you?
Oh yes, I was going to ask that
thank
too.
you. Oh, you guys are seeing my videos coming through there.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a trilobite fossil up off of my right shoulder, and over my left shoulder, I've got an ancient sea lily fossilized.
That's what I'm interested in.
Got some science-looking stuff. I wanted to impress you.
I'm looking behind and go, what is that?
And those are legitimate fossils?
Yeah. Oh, legitimate fossils.
Dude,
absolutely. I wrote a book about the Cambrian explosion, so I collected a lot of cool stuff. And trilobites are iconic forms from the Cambrian period. I was fascinated with them when I was a kid. So I thought, Bill Nye gets to call himself the science guy. I thought I'd put some stuff in the background.
I'm actually glad you mentioned his name. What is your now? Look,
awesome.
I'm not trying to say we have to knock the guy, but as far as his scientific level and what he comes out with, I mean, I watched the debate between him and Ken Ham. But I loved Ken. I actually enjoyed listening to Ken Ham because I know what Ken Ham was trying to do, and he was trying to say like, God says, if you seek me, you will find me, and that's what he kept going to. And Bill kept going to go science, and we held up a rock. This is what it's all about. What's your opinion of Bill? What does he really know?
Well,
is he a scientist?
Yeah.
Or is that more TV?
He's a mechanical engineer, and far be it from me to ever say anything negative about
Of
mechanical
course.
engineers. My dad is one, and they're terrific. And he, in fact, taught me engineers effectively run the world because they build everything important that we use. So
Yes.
that's great. But he doesn't. He hasn't done advanced study or research on any of these questions upon which he pontificates in service of his basically atheistic polemic. He doesn't come out and say atheism, but he's very definitely against religious belief, and he's advancing a kind of scientism that says science answers all the questions. We don't want to resort to any of this mythological belief in God or he's very opposed to the idea of intelligent design.
Yeah,
he's written a book called Unbelievable, which is about the case. Undeniable, which is he thinks about the case for Darwinian evolution. And he says very explicitly that because Darwinian evolution is true, we don't really have any need to resort to the idea of intelligent design or God as a creator. Wow. But I don't think he actually knows very much about what's going on in evolutionary biology today. Leading evolutionary theorists are now calling for a new theory of evolution precisely because they recognize that the mutation natural selection mechanism lacks creative power. It does a good job of explaining small scale variations and modifications of existing organisms and forms of life, but it's wholly inadequate to explain the major innovations in the history of life, such as the origin of trilobites or other animal forms that first arise in the Cambrian period, and other major fossil explosions in the history of life. So he's written a popular book using very standard, well-trod arguments for the sufficiency of evolutionary theory. I think the arguments are out of date, and leading people, even in evolutionary biology, are now saying, hey, we need a new mechanism because mutation and selection has very limited creative power. And one of the big problems that it can't explain is precisely the origin of the information that you would need to build a new form of life. We know in our modern computer age that if you want to give your computer a new function, you got to provide new code. Same thing holds true in biology. If the evolutionary process is to build a new form of life, a fundamentally new form of life, that's going to require a lot of new code and other higher levels of information and informational control as well. And mutation and selection are poor candidates for generating information because mutations degrade information. They're random changes in an established genetic program or a gene or text of genetic information. And over time, after very few mutational changes, the ability for those genes to code for functional proteins is so degraded that the proteins won't fold properly. So you can get a few minor changes that will give you minor modifications by mutation. But if those accumulate over very much time, you're going to degrade what you've got long before you get to any fundamentally new gene capable of building a fundamentally new protein and any fundamentally new form of life. Computer programmers understand this intuitively. If you've got a section of computer software, you start randomly fiddling with zeros and ones, you're going to degrade the function of that program long before you generate a new program or operating system.
Okay.
So mutation is not an effective way to generate the amount of information you need to build new forms of life. And so really the whole new neo-Darwinian program has reached an impasse, and it lacks a mechanism with creative power. Bill Nye defends this system of thought as undeniable, but it's anything but.
That's what I was kind of now we're kind of leading towards the topic of something else I want to discuss. It's not really the topic where we began with. So let me ask you. I mean, I'm a subscriber to. I mean, I guess you can tell me I'm wrong because he knows more than I do.
You're wrong.
But I'm a subscriber to microevolution. I can't jump onto the macroevolution. Is there room for evolution, biblically speaking, in your purview?
Well, exactly in the sense that you mean, I think. Well, I mean, there's a biblical point of view, and let me just answer scientifically first, and then we'll talk about the theological aspects. But the distinction between micro and macro evolution is actually well established. Okay. And a lot of times when people make that distinction, staunch defenders of contemporary Darwinism will say, "Oh, that's just a creationist distinction," but it actually first came into evolutionary literature through Theodosius Dobzhansky, who was one of the founders of the modern synthesis, the neo-Darwinian theory that is textbook orthodoxy still today. And he got the distinction from his Soviet Russian mentor, whose name I've suddenly forgotten, but we have an article about this on our Evolution News and Views by Paul Nelson. And the Russian biologist who first made this distinction said that he thought that microevolution was well established, but there wasn't a known mechanism for macroevolution. Dobzhansky acknowledged that he'd gotten this idea from his mentor, but said, well, he thought that microevolution, if given enough time, would eventually produce macroevolutionary change. That equation now, I think, is increasingly doubted by leading evolutionary biologists. The small-scale variations that are produced by speciation processes or by mutations that we can observe cannot be indefinitely extrapolated to produce large-scale morphological change in the history of life. And we're really without any materialistic evolutionary mechanism that could account for those major innovations. So I think the distinction you make is really valid scientifically. And therefore, if someone thinks that God established adaptive capacity in organisms that allow them to change within limits, but that such processes do not obviate the need for creation of new form, I think that's entirely a plausible, both scientific and theological position.
So would the term adaptation be more suitable for the topic?
Yeah,
than
because I
more
like
evolution?
what you said. You said it, a controlled version, which means, like, for example, a tadpole starts to develop legs. I mean, the tail goes away, it becomes a frog. And that stops there. It doesn't turn into,
Well,
something else.
that's a pre-programmed developmental program. That's not even evolution. That's just the whole system was built to do that. To go through those phases of change. But there's a wonderful scientist, cell biologist at the University of Chicago named James Shapiro, who has a new model of evolution that he calls natural genetic engineering, in which he's argued that most of the mutations that we see taking place in living organisms, or at least many of the most significant ones, are not random in the Darwinian sense, but rather they're under a kind of pre-programmed or algorithmic control, such that when a certain environmental change or stress emerges, that a change emerges that places a stress on an organism, that it triggers the production of certain proteins or certain types of responses. And that there's a kind of if-then subroutine at work in the organism that allows latent genetic information to be expressed for its benefit under certain circumstances, but not under others. And that's a fascinating idea. Yeah. And I think it's getting increasingly well documented. It sounds like there's this pre-programmed adaptive capacity is crucial to an organism's ability to survive and adapt to environmental changes. But the key is that it's pre-programmed, and that requires some initial programming.
Right, exactly.
Shapiro, interestingly, does not attempt to explain where the original programming comes from.
Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Maps what
That's a good point. Good observation.
Yeah.
I think we there's a lot to take in here. But you and I, we have about 10,000 more questions.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, but one way we can have some of those
I
questions.
should have consented to only do the interview with one of you. This is going to take all day.
Yes. So we basically, what we'll do is mention, number one, your book, which is The God Hypothesis, which you literally uncover a lot of great facts in that, and talk about some of the scientists like you mentioned, and people can get that anywhere, really. They can get it. You just go online and it's there.
Where do you want viewers to go?
Yeah, where would you like them to go?
Well, I have a website, returnofthegodhypothesis.com, with all the words bunched together, returnofthegodhypothesis.com. And we've got animations, debates, video interviews, and audio interviews all logged there. But you can also navigate from there to the websites for the other books I've done. Darwin's Doubt, the explosive origin of animal life, and the case for intelligent design. And what we've been talking about, the evolution question, is largely pertains to material discussed in that book. And then my first book was Signature in the Cell, which was about the problem of the origin of the very first life, and the digital code and the DNA, and the whole discovery of that by Watson and Crick and others. So there's book websites for each of those books, but returnofthegodhypothesis.com is a great place to gain access to a lot of material if you're into this subject. And you can, I think Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indie Books, all the online sellers are offering all three of the books, but Return of the God Hypothesis in particular.
We really appreciate. Seriously, I speak on all our behalf.
What an awesome meeting this.
Well, that is just, but also the time and the effort and the work that you do into studying this stuff is unbelievable. I know I couldn't do it, so I really appreciate it, because we can come to you and ask you about it. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
You guys came really well prepared for the interview. It was very good questions and good discussion. You even asked about my fossils. I mean, it makes it feel very important.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Stephen Meyer. Thank you so much for joining us again, and we hope to have you on again another time in the future. So
very good. Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
God bless you. We'll talk to you soon.
You too, man.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
So I'll tell you, fantastic information. And I hope everybody who's watching this, if you want to learn more, go to the websites that he provided. The Return of the God Hypothesis. I think it was .com or .org. One of those.
.com.
You can Google. I mean, of course, if you Google, you'll see all this stuff. I mean, Stephen Meyer.
What an amazing mind. Again, I mean,
I can't fathom.
The last time we talked to him, I
Yeah.
mean, I felt educated. Now I feel dumber.
We asked him the right questions on accident. That's the thing.
Well, hopefully you felt a little smarter, Mike.
I do, but it's like watching what must go on in a man's mind. Like,
you know what I love about it? Like, okay, so if you asked me one of those questions,
right,
I'd probably kind of try to come up with some type of theory, and it would sound like I was talking like the lingo on the street. you ask him the same question, and it's like he'll come up with an answer like close to what we would have, not really, but like just enough to like
Not really.
not really. But there's like 10,000 details in between that that perfectly
line of
balances and lines up to what you're just like.
Yeah, other books, other people in the
Yeah.
field.
Yeah, I mean, I've
to.
read 5,000 books on that particular cell thing, organism, and it's not correct because of da 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 da. It's just like,
Wow.
yeah.
No, it was great.
Yeah.
Really good. And I think he solidified some of the thoughts that I had, and
Yep.
really intelligent.
One of the questions that you had when we were talking beforehand, and me and Mike were discussing how, does that change anything in reference
Absolutely
to
not.
God? And which is awesome the way he presented that, and that's true. It wouldn't, because again, it just shows more. There's more information, and information brings about exactly what he said. So rewatch this so you can see what he said about that. But I'll tell you what, it's a super great pleasure to have him, especially with this. It's crazy how this is all of a sudden now. It's been going on for a long time. But a lot of people are really getting into the UFO, thing right now, and I understand why. You see on the media,
Independence Day 3 coming out.
right? Yeah, exactly. Independence Day 1 was the best one they had so far. But I will tell you, the fact of the matter is that it's obviously happening around us. People are paying attention to it, and people want answers. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that.
But what does that point to? That points to that people have.
They want to know why they're here.
Exactly. They want to have a reason.
Yeah.
And they want to have a purpose, and they want to know why.
They want it more complicated than it
but
really
they
is.
don't want you to tell them what we
Right.
already know.
Right. We've known it for a
No,
long
we've
time.
tried that.
Yeah.
We tried
Yeah.
the God stuff. We
Yeah.
tried that.
I know he created us.
It's got to
Well,
be something
I don't-
else.
Yeah.
It's got to be the purple guy. It
Right.
has to be. Because why? Because it makes me feel better about myself getting away with doing what I want to do, how I want to do it on my terms.
Mike, that could be your father on that ship. Your legit father on that ship that they're seeing right now in the videos. So that's the point. It's just like, it's ridiculous. No offense.
Hey, it's funny. I remember what's that movie? Marvel movie, Guardian of the Galaxy.
Yes. Yeah.
What was
His dad?
His dad name.
Yeah.
What was his name? Ego.
Ego.
There's a big planet named
Yeah.
Ego.
Yeah.
What's that tell you?
He said, they said, how are you able to do all this stuff? And he's like, I'm a terrestrial, sweetheart. He's like, small G. On my humble days, like Drax. Remember when he said that?
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, okay. But there's, obviously.
But people have a desire to know something.
They have, which is
Whereas
good.
We have the answer.
Right.
And they just don't want to hear it.
Right. And it's so sad that it's so, when we were talking about it being offended yesterday, you and I were talking about this. It's, why does it offend you that much that this could possibly, like, even if you, like, okay, if you put the same theory on an alien, you'll be mad at him too.
Right.
But you still want him to be the guy, the person that created you. That makes no sense to me. Let it be God, because it is God.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be offended, fine. But
You know
then
why?
you got to get over it.
Because it makes you put a mirror in front of yourself.
That's exactly right. Yep.
It makes you realize you really aren't as pretty as you think you are. I'm not
Exactly.
talking in the physical, natural sense.
No.
That we're ugly and we have a big empty spot.
There's pride,
needs to
there's
be filled,
arrogance,
yes.
there's all these things. And you know what? That's what's so, if they could really, really read it and discover what really happened, especially why Christ came, they'd be able to look in that mirror and say, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
Because
I don't
that's
know
the
about
point.
you, but every alien movie I've seen, they pretty much attack and destroy us.
Yeah,
Besides,
That's
besides
the other
E.T.
reason why we want
Besides
to turn to
E.T.
Christ.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
E.T. was probably the
Different.
nicest one there.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at Alien, the movie Alien.
I will say, though, with not to get on these weird tangents, but I don't know if you've experienced this with your kids or anybody that's watched it. Hannah, my wife, and a few other people, they can't watch it because E.T. scared them too much. He was just scary, especially when he got sick.
E.T.
Yeah,
phone home.
and he's like all sick and like gray looking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was never scared. Yeah. I was never scared. I thought he was cool. I wanted to have an alien
I
drop
loved
out of
it.
the sky.
I never got scared about that movie. I know other people too. That movie just freaked them out. It's
Yeah.
like, really? Why?
He's so cute. Like, what are you talking about?
I want him to get in my basket so I can fly my bike.
Now, Gremlins was scary.
Yeah,
Remember
that was,
Gizmo?
that was cool. Gizmo was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they
then-
weren't alien.
No, but then when they got, well, I forget. He multiplied, but then they became evil. Is that what it was? I forget.
Well, no. If he ate or got wet, they would-
That's what
they
it
would
was.
pop
Don't feed
out.
him after midnight.
That's what it
Or
was. Yeah.
Don't let
don't
'em
feed
get
me
wet.
after midnight.
That's okay. I showed a quick clip of Emery because we saw some stuff to him. I was like, that looks like Gizmo. Who's Gizmo? I was like, I'll show you real quick. He's like, oh, I didn't show him the scary parts. I was like, look, he's multiplying right now. And to other Gizmos, oh, he's so cute. And I just turned it off. I'm like, you don't want to see that stuff. It gets freaky, actually. Anyway, yeah. Again,
We'll wrap up on
we'll
that
wrap
note.
it up. If you're watching this at a later time, really take in what he said, and I would love to hear your opinions about it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We get some great comments on there. We had one dislike, I think, on the last one, probably because they didn't agree or whatever, which is fine. But don't just dislike it. Leave your opinion. Why?
It's okay to dislike.
Yeah,
it's okay not to agree with Kenny. But
yes, exactly. It's okay. I don't mind. But why? What is your disagreement? We'd like to see your little paragraph that you want to write of what is your opinion.
And like we've always started with we stay with this show.
Yes.
This show is about having that open forum, and we can let's come to the table, have a cup of coffee.
There'll be no attack
and discuss our differences. This is a judgment-free zone.
It totally is. Yeah.
So come here.
And we appreciate it very much.
Let us know what else would you like to see on the show.
Yes.
More interviews, more of me and Kenny just bantering.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah.
We would appreciate it very much. Yeah. Again, we'll have some live guests in studio eventually here.
Yes.
Too. But yeah, we've had a great. If you haven't checked out our previous interviews with some great guys, like we've had an interview with Stephen Meyer a while ago. That's on there. Also, Brigitte Gabrielle. We've had Sam Sorbo. We've had David Horowitz, and also a long time ago, a lot of old stuff too.
Guys.
But one in particular that comes to mind, Steve Turley, which we've had on a long time ago, which I would love to have him on again. Check out that interview as well. Just some really smart minds out there, and thank God that those smart minds are humble enough to put their minds in God's hands, because that's what's great about it. But you'll really appreciate those interviews. It's bigger than all of us here in the studio, but we really appreciate you. If you have not yet subscribed on YouTube, please do so. The Ken and Mike Show, also on Facebook, the Ken and Mike Show on Facebook, and also the BMG Network, because there you'll be able to find some great other shows like the Pac-Man Show, Mic'd Up with Mike Hansen, which is coming out next week.
This show was awesome.
This show was awesome.
It was a good time.
Check out all of our interviews again at the BMGNetwork.com. I was kind of southern slang there.
Wow. Where'd you go for vacation?
Yeah, Cape Cod. I don't know what's going on. But the BMGNetwork.com.
Y'all come back
yeah,
now.
Yeah.
You hear?
Check out the Adrian Ross Show and the Ken Burns Show. All of it's right there for you on the BMGNetwork.com. Thank you, guys. God bless, Mike. It was a pleasure.
Awesome,
right.
Kenny. Next
Mel,
week.
Yeah.
The Ken and Mike Show.